film, write a book, whatever the case is, that's absolutely fine. We're building this new world, we're expanding on the game. How do we go about negotiating that ownership? Because typically, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, we hand it to them, including technology, sometimes have a source of time. How do we position that we not necessarily in the Machiavellian way, but ensure that we retain rights to the stuff that's done?
It starts at a very, very early stage, I think, and it's about quarantining the project to some degree, so that you say, okay, we're going to do this work, this project here, and the earlier on that you can introduce that, the concept of that narrow scope of works, the better, so that you can say, we're developing, and this is where I go back to that, just be very aware of what you're creating. We're creating all these things here for the game. This stuff, absolutely, you can use exclusively for the game. But this stuff here has value outside the game, and we want to keep it. This is all stuff that always ends in the contracts, but from a legal perspective, often that part of the deal is done much earlier on. So I think the most useful thing is, in the early negotiations, to direct the conversation towards, if you like, the narrowing of the project, which allows you to then later say, what I've done here is outside this project. What I find sometimes is I get a contract where it says the publisher owns everything, and then my first stage is to go, well, can we cut this down so that the developer can go on to do other things with it? But what you can get from the other lawyer is saying, no, this has all been agreed already. We're getting everything to do with whatever you touch. So the earlier it can be introduced into commercial conversations, the better. That will give you a lawyer a chance to hack away at the contract. The other thing I'd mention is that again, when you're developing anything, keep a record of how it's created. Again, so that there's a possibility that you can distinguish it from a particular project that you're working on. Because the contracts often try and draw a line between material that you owned and created before the deal and material created just for the purpose of the deal. And if you can, I guess, not in a Machiavellian way, but just make it again nice and clear that you've got stuff that you've been working on before that doesn't form part of this deal. They can use it for the game, but you retain all the other rights. So in sum, it's about, I think, being really clear about what it is that you're creating and the potential value of it. Wherever you can, introducing into the conversation early that this is not something which is you're going to be giving up all your IP. And then making sure as it goes from, if you like, the successful pitch through to a contract, the other side doesn't just keep nibbling away and putting you under excessive commercial pressure.
Building on that, just wanted to draw it back to an event that happened at GPAC last year in the last day of the conference. We had a panel of very distinguished publishers from all around the world, and basically a member of the audience asked, Australia as a nation is trying to get online off the ground, as a lot of studios. Something that we're very interested in is owning the IP, or aspects of the IP. How do we go about this? And the answer was simply, we won't. That was the answer we got. Now, and this is from like people very highly distinguished in the publishing world. Now, hearing that, and then you look at something like Max Payne. Now, Max Payne, now anyone correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the rights to the game and anything else was signed over except for the main character, his name and his likeness. Now, that main character's likeness sold for something like $29 million. I'm sure Taurus would be pretty happy to palm off one of our original titles because we've got $29 million per character. What in your eyes are certain things that publishers may look at and see, shit, we're just given that character, whatever, what are they going to do with it? But then can be used to your advantage. Like that maybe I can do so much of this that they don't know.
Look, it's really difficult. I mean, partly it's a question of, are they less aware than you are of the value of what you're creating? Probably not. Then it just comes down to how much do they want you, and how much they're potentially willing to give up at the end of the day to keep you happy, to keep you in the job. The other way in which people can retain their IP is kind of obviously not to do deals with those people who make it a mandatory term. And you look at other models, and in the film financing world, there absolutely is a model where you're getting government support, the intellectual property all gets owned by a production company. People have a stake in that IP. Once it's all said and done, you retain it. And so you look at different financing models. Independent production is the easiest way to do it. But the problem with that, of course, you don't have access to finance. So it's this constant battle that you play. And by shunning those with a lot of money, but with the need to own your IP and pursuing the independent path, you may own your IP, but own your IP on something that's valueless because you can't market it, because you can't take it to the next level. It's a battleground.
Yeah, it's not there for non-cost companies. Like we build publishers distribution. Non-cost companies are especially $10 million. Manage small prices. It's very hard to reach.
And that's the thing, because the publishers have a very valid reason, and that is that if they're putting $10 million into a massive game, let's say $20 million, then they're going to spend at least $10 million marketing that massive game. So it's a $30 million investment that they've made into something, and then you want to keep the game. That's huge. Yeah, it's a huge commitment from them. So in that sense, we're battling against common sense as well.
Well, that's the thing. You've got to keep it real.
Yeah.
If your goal of owning your IP is to make money, are you actually going to make more money by holding on to it but not developing it, marketing it in the way that it should be, or are you going to make more money by doing it with a big publishing company?
With some of the alternative things, what's becoming very popular, especially with smaller developers, and just people wanting to start out, and something's been around for years, is the whole shareware, freeware type. I'll just get my game out there, and then maybe I'll get a sequel, etc. But if you release something, if you make, let's say you make a small game, it's a flash game, or whatever, you put it online, and you're going, okay, but this is free. Now, obviously, you created it and you own it, but once you release something in the public domain, again, what happens to from a legal point of view? I mean, especially when you're saying that there are different copyright laws in all the different countries. What's stopping somebody in Japan going, great idea, snatch? Yeah. And then, of course, you've got the whole thing of like, well, the only way, yes, you own it, and you can probably prove you own it, but the only way you can get anything back is to drag out a team of lawyers, drag it through the courts, etc. I mean, what is the situation with releasing something free into the public domain? Does that mean we've lost control?
No. But, sorry to be a lawyer here, it depends on what you mean by free. And what I really mean is, when you put something on the internet, what does that mean? I'll talk to that now. From a legal perspective, if someone came to me saying, I made this great flash game, it's now #1, and I've just noticed that the Japanese company X has just released a platform game on Xbox, entirely based on my game. You'd look at, on what basis did you put it up online? Are there any terms that went with it? Let's assume not, because there never are. You would say, look, by putting it up there, I was saying to people, play my game. I was not saying, rip off my stuff. And any sensible judge would go, yeah, that's clearly what you meant. As you say, practically, do you then have to march out your team of ducks with lawyers to get something done? Maybe, but with that example, you'd have a very good bargaining position with the Japanese company to say you've just infringed my rights, and I've got 10 dark-suited lawyers standing behind me ready to go. It's great, unless you like to talk about it, and they probably will. So